The first thing you should know is that I never actually missed the bus. The second thing you should know is that I let it leave anyway. And the third thing you should know is that Allie Reeves was sitting in her car at the curb with the engine running, hazard lights blinking against the wet pavement, watching me stand at that bus stop like she already knew I was going to be an idiot about it. I'm Noah Bennett. I was 26 that winter, working as a copywriter at a mid-sized marketing agency in Denver, the kind of job where you spend 8 hours a day convincing strangers that a granola bar could change their life. It wasn't glamorous. It paid enough to keep the lights on and gave me something to complain about at happy hour, which honestly might be the real purpose of most entry-level marketing jobs. Most days that was enough. Allie worked 2 desks over in the same open floor plan on the design side, which meant our jobs technically overlapped just enough to give us an excuse to talk 15 times a day. She was 25, sharp in a way that made client meetings genuinely funny instead of just painful. And she had a laugh that made the whole row of desks turn around, every single time, like it was contagious. We'd been co-workers for a year and a half. Somewhere in there, without either of us admitting it out loud, we'd become something closer to best friends who happened to share a Wi-Fi password with 40 other people. That Thursday, the agency had kept us late for a client deck that needed 1 more pass, which in office language means at least 3 more passes, and somebody crying quietly in the supply closet. By the time I got out, it was raining sideways, my phone was at 4%, and I watched the 742 bus pull away from the stop 2 blocks ahead of me while I was still jogging toward it with my laptop bag slapping against my hip like it was personally disappointed in me. I stood there under the flickering bus shelter light, soaked through my jacket, doing the math on how long a rideshare would take to get to me in this weather versus how long I could stand there pretending this was fine. That was when a pair of headlights pulled up along the curb and a window rolled down, and Allie leaned across the passenger seat with her hair still damp from running to her own car 20 minutes earlier. "Get in, Bennett," she said. "You look like a golden retriever that lost an argument with a garden hose." I bent down to the window instead of getting in immediately because apparently my brain needed a second to process being rescued. "How long have you been sitting here?" 10 minutes. "You've been sitting at a bus stop for 10 minutes. "I've been sitting at your bus stop for 10 minutes, she corrected. "There's a difference. Mine was much closer to the office. You drove past your own street to sit here in the rain. I drove past my own street to make sure my coworker didn't drown in a puddle waiting for public transportation, that is, and I checked, 17 minutes late tonight." She said it like she'd rehearsed the sentence, which, knowing Allie, she probably had, complete with a citation. "Are you getting in, or are you going to stand there being wet and grateful at me all night?" I got in. The heater was already running, blasting warm air against my soaked jeans, and there was a coffee sitting in the cup holder that I recognized as my order, not hers, sitting there like she'd bought it 20 minutes ago on the off chance I'd actually need it. "You bought me coffee," I said. "I bought myself coffee. You're borrowing it. There's a difference." "You keep saying that." "There isn't a difference. There's always a difference, Noah. That's the whole trick." She pulled away from the curb, wipers thumping against the windshield, street lights sliding gold and wet across the glass. "Buckle up. I drive like I'm being timed." Comforting. I contain multitudes. I should tell you here that I had known, for about 4 months, in the specific quiet way you know things you've decided not to look at directly, that I liked Allie Reeves as more than a coworker who fed me caffeine and insults in equal measure. I hadn't done anything about it. I had a personal policy against ruining good things by naming them out loud, a policy that had served me reasonably well since my last relationship ended 8 months earlier in the kind of slow, mutual fade that doesn't even give you the dignity of a real breakup story. My ex, Claire, and I had simply stopped reaching for each other one day and never started again. No fight, no scene, just silence with a lease attached to it, until the lease ran out, and so did we. Allie knew the outline of that story. She didn't know the part where somewhere around month 3 of knowing her, I'd started comparing every good moment in my life to whether or not she'd think it was funny. You're staring at the dashboard like it insulted you. Allie said, glancing over at a red light. What's going on in there? Just recalibrating. Almost died at a bus stop, remember? You did not almost die. You were mildly inconvenienced by weather. Very different category of tragedy. Feels the same from inside my shoes. Your shoes are the real victims here. She reached over without looking and turned the heat vent so it blew directly on my hands. A small unthinking gesture that did something unfair to my chest. There. Circulation restored. You're welcome. Thank you. I expect a testimonial. 5 stars. Saved my life. Only mildly judged me for it. That's generous. You judged me extensively. I judge everyone extensively. It's how I show love. She said it lightly, the way she said most things, tossed out like it cost her nothing. I filed it away anyway, the way I filed away most things. Allie said, in the folder marked "Do not open until you're ready to deal with the consequences." We drove in comfortable quiet for a few blocks, rain streaking sideways across the windshield. The radio turned low on some station, playing something acoustic and unbothered. My apartment was 15 minutes from the office. Hers was 6. She was going 20 minutes out of her way, in a downpour, on a Thursday night, and hadn't once made it sound like an inconvenience. You didn't have to do this, I said finally. I know. I mean it. You could have just gone home. Allie glanced at me, then back at the road, and for a second the joking dropped out of her voice entirely. I know that too, Noah. I did it anyway. That's kind of the whole point of doing something. I didn't have a comeback for that. I sat there with the borrowed coffee warming my hands and watched the city blur past the window, and thought, not for the first time, that I was in real trouble. The next few weeks didn't change anything on paper. We still sat 2 desks apart. We still argued about client decks and stole each other's snacks and texted each other memes at 11 at night under the thin cover of work stuff. But something had shifted since the bus stop, some low hum underneath all our usual banter that neither of us mentioned and both of us clearly noticed. It came to a head on a Tuesday, 3 weeks later, at Marcus's birthday thing at the bar down the street from the office. Half the agency showed up, crammed into a booth built for 6 that somehow held 9, and at some point Allie ended up wedged against my side because there was, genuinely, nowhere else to sit. This is fine, she said, not moving. This is a completely normal seating arrangement between coworkers. Extremely normal, I agreed. Very standard HR-approved proximity. HR would have opinions. HR has opinions about everything. I once got an email about how I refrigerate leftovers. She laughed, and I felt it more than heard it, her shoulders shaking against mine in the crowded booth. Across the table, our coworker Priya raised an eyebrow at both of us over her drink. The exact universal expression of a woman watching 2 idiots figure something out in slow motion. You 2 are unbearable, Priya said. Just so you know. We're coworkers, Allie said. At the same time I said, we're friends, and we both heard how that landed. 2 different answers to a question nobody had technically asked. Priya just smiled into her glass and said nothing, which was somehow worse than if she'd said something. Later, when the group started thinning out and the rain had started up again outside, Allie and I ended up on the sidewalk under the bar's narrow awning, waiting for the worst of it to pass before we made a run for our cars. Cold? I asked. Freezing. It's basically your fault, you know. You're the one who let a bus leave without you 3 weeks ago and started this whole pattern. I let one bus leave. You started driving 20 minutes out of your way on principle. On principle, she agreed. A very important principle. Which is, she looked at me, rain misting silver in the streetlight, and for once didn't have a joke ready immediately. That I like knowing you got home okay, she said. Is that a weird principle? No, I said. My voice came out lower than I meant it to. That's not weird. The air between us changed the way it does right before something you can't take back. I could see her breath in the cold. I could see the exact moment she decided not to make this into a joke, which for Allie was practically a declaration of war against her own personality. Noah, she said quietly. Yeah, I'm going to say something, and I need you to not make it weird. I make everything weird. It's my whole personality. I know. Try anyway. She took a breath. I don't drive 20 minutes out of my way for just anyone. I know that. Do you? She searched my face like she was looking for something specific. Because I've been doing it for 3 weeks, and you haven't said anything. And I've started wondering if I'm the only one who noticed. There it was. The door, standing open, waiting for one of us to walk through it or slam it shut. I noticed, I said. I've noticed for a lot longer than 3 weeks. Her breath caught, visible in the cold air. How much longer? Embarrassingly longer. Define embarrassingly. For months. Give or take. Allie stared at me. For months. I told you it was embarrassing. You've been buying me coffee for 4 months, and it wasn't just because I bought yours first. That was a cover story. A very sophisticated one. It was not sophisticated. It was extremely obvious. Priya's been running a betting pool since October. There's a betting pool? There is absolutely a betting pool. And if we do this, I will be forfeiting $40 I put on. Never. They're both cowards, so understand this comes at a personal cost. I laughed, and some of the tension broke, but not all of it. Not the important part, the part where she was still standing close enough that I could see the individual raindrops caught in her hair. Can I ask you something? I said. You're already doing it. Are you cold, or are you standing this close to me on purpose? Allie's mouth curved slowly. Both things can be true, Noah. That's kind of my whole deal. I reached up and brushed a bit of rain off her cheek before I could talk myself out of it, my hand lingering there a half-second longer than the gesture strictly required. She went still under my palm, the way people go still right before they decide not to pull away. I'm going to kiss you, I said. Unless you tell me not to. I'm not going to tell you not to. So I did. It was soft at first, careful, the kind of kiss that asks a question instead of making a statement. Allie's hand came up to my jacket, fisting in the fabric like she needed something to hold on to. And when she kissed me back, it wasn't careful at all. The rain kept falling around the edge of the awning. Somewhere behind us, the bar door opened and a burst of noise spilled out onto the sidewalk, and neither of us pulled away. When we finally broke apart, she stayed close, forehead against my jaw, breathing unsteady. Well, she said, that's going to complicate the seating chart. Worth it. Extremely worth it. She pulled back to look at me, eyes bright even in the gray evening light. For the record, I've been noticing you for longer than 4 months. How much longer? Since the day you brought me the wrong coffee order on purpose because you said the barista looked like she needed a win, and then you drank the wrong one yourself so it wouldn't go to waste. She shook her head. That's the exact moment I was doomed. That was a year ago. I told you. Cowards, both of us. Priya's $40 are officially at risk. Word travels fast in an office of 40 people who spend 8 hours a day pretending to work while actually tracking each other's love lives with the precision of federal investigators. By Friday, half the agency knew, and Priya walked past my desk, dropped a $1 bill on my keyboard, and said, "Keep the change," without breaking stride, which I later learned meant she'd lost the pool and was taking it about as gracefully as could be expected. Allie and I didn't make some big announcement. We just stopped pretending. She started leaving her coffee order taped to my monitor on days she knew I'd get there first. I started walking the long way past her desk on purpose instead of by accident. We went on our first real date that Saturday, a tiny noodle place 2 blocks from her apartment, and spent most of it laughing about the betting pool and arguing over who owed who for 3 years of borrowed coffee. You should know, Allie said, twirling noodles onto her chopsticks with the concentration of someone defusing a bomb, that my little brother is going to lose his mind about this. Why? Because he's been rooting for you since Christmas. He met you at the office party and decided you were, quote, the only tolerable adult in your entire company. He's 14. He has strong opinions and no filter. I like him already. He'll test you. He asks everyone I date if they know the difference between a crocodile and an alligator. It's a screening process. Do I get to know the answer before or after he asks? Neither. That's the whole point. It's not about the answer. It's about whether you panic. I did not panic, as it turned out, 3 weeks later, when I met her family at a Sunday dinner that felt significantly higher stakes than the client pitch I'd survived that same week. Allie's brother, A serious, gangly kid named Theo cornered me by the chip bowl within 4 minutes of my arrival. Crocodile or alligator, he said, without preamble. Snout shape. Crocodiles have narrower, V-shaped snouts. Alligators are more U-shaped. Also, crocodiles show their bottom teeth when their mouths are closed. Alligators don't. Theo studied me for a long, silent moment, then nodded once, gravely, like a judge delivering a verdict. Okay, he said. You can stay. Then he walked away with a handful of chips like nothing had happened. Allie, watching from the kitchen doorway, looked genuinely stunned. How did you know that? I have a niece who's obsessed with reptiles. I did my homework. You did homework. For my brother's crocodile test. I take relationships seriously. Something in her face went soft and unguarded in a way I hadn't seen before, not even after the kiss under the awning. You're going to be a problem, Noah Bennett, she said quietly. A very good problem. Dinner went easier after that. Her mother liked me because I complimented the cooking honestly instead of politely. Her father liked me because I knew enough about basketball to argue with him about a trade that had happened 4 years ago and clearly still bothered him personally. It felt, for the first time and longer than I wanted to admit, like walking into a room where I was allowed to just be myself and have that be enough. Even her grandmother, who apparently vetted every boyfriend Allie had ever brought home with the enthusiasm of a customs officer, seemed unusually approving. She cornered me near the dessert table with a plate of pie I hadn't asked for and eyes that missed absolutely nothing. You held the car door for her, she said. It wasn't a question. I did. Most young men forget that part now. They think opening an app is the same as opening a door. She studied me for a long moment, the same way Theo had, except with 50 more years of practice behind it. She's been guarded a long time, longer than she lets people see. I've noticed. Good, the grandmother said, satisfied, and handed me a second slice of pie I also hadn't asked for, which I took as the highest compliment available. It was on the drive home that the first crack showed up, small and easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. Allie's phone buzzed in the cup holder while she was driving, and out of habit, not thinking, I glanced at the screen the way you do when you're comfortable enough with someone that boundaries around phones haven't been drawn yet. The text was from a name I didn't recognize. Derek, heard you're seeing someone from work. Didn't take you long. I didn't say anything. Allie glanced down at the screen at a red light, and I watched her jaw tighten just slightly before she reached over and turned the phone face down without reading the rest. Who's Derek? I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Nobody important. Allie. She exhaled, long and slow, hands tightening on the wheel. My ex. From before the agency. We dated for a year and a half. It ended badly, and he has never once in the 2 years since managed to mind his own business about my life. The light turned green. She drove for another block before she added, quieter, he works at Halston Media, which is the agency's biggest competitor, which means he knows more people who know us than either of us would like. How does he know about me already? I genuinely don't know. Small industry. Big mouths. She glanced at me. I should have told you about him before dinner. I'm sorry. I didn't want him to be a thing before he actually became a thing. He's not a thing now. He wants to be, she said simply. He's been texting on and off for months. Nothing that crosses a real line. Just enough to remind me he exists. I usually don't answer. She hesitated. I probably should have blocked him a long time ago. I kept not doing it because it felt dramatic over nothing. It's not nothing if it's still happening. I know that now. She reached over and took my hand at the next red light, lacing her fingers through mine like she needed the anchor. I'm not choosing him, Noah. I want to be really clear about that. I'm choosing to finally deal with him, which is different. I believed her. I want to be honest about that, because this isn't a story where I spent the next month secretly suspicious of my girlfriend over a text message. I believed her completely. What I didn't expect was how much Derek would decide, on his own, to make himself a thing anyway. It started small. A comment on one of Allie's old photos, the kind of thing you could almost write off as an accident if it happened once. Then a message to a mutual friend, fishing for details about how serious things were with the copywriter guy. Then, 2 weeks after the family dinner, an actual appearance, in person, at a bar where half our office had gathered for a co-worker's going-away party. I saw him before Allie did. Tall, put together in the specific way of a guy who wanted you to notice how put together he was. Standing near the bar with a drink he clearly wasn't there to finish. He clocked Allie across the room at almost the same moment I did, and started walking over before I could decide whether to intercept him or let it play out. "Allie," he said, all easy confidence, like he had every right to be standing in front of her. "Been a while." Allie went still beside me, her whole posture shifting into something guarded I hadn't seen from her before. "Derek, what are you doing here?" "Katie invited me." Small world. His eyes moved to me, sizing me up in that particular way men do when they've already decided you're a problem to be solved. "You must be the copywriter." "Noah," I said, not offering my hand, because something about the way he said copywriter made it sound like an insult he'd been saving. "Right. Noah." He looked back at Allie. "Can we talk? Just for a minute." "There's nothing to talk about." "There's a lot to talk about, actually. I heard you're basically living the same life we had. Same bars, same friend group, same everything. Except now with an office guy who probably doesn't even know your coffee order." "He knows my coffee order," Allie said flatly. "He's known it since before we were dating, which is more than I can say for you after a year and a half." Derek's jaw tightened. "Wow. Okay. You didn't come here to say hi, Derek. You came here to make a face." Priya already called it a specific face, if that helps you calibrate. I hadn't planned to say anything. Wanted to let Allie handle this the way she was clearly capable of handling it. But something about the way he was standing there, entitled and smug, made the words come out anyway. "I think you should probably head back to your friends," I said, keeping my voice even. "This isn't really your conversation to be part of." Derek looked at me properly for the first time, some of the confidence flickering. "This is between me and her." "It's really not," Allie said. "There is no me and you anymore, Derek. There hasn't been for 2 years. I'm asking you, one more time, kindly, to leave me alone. If I have to ask again, it stops being kind." For a second, he just stared at her, jaw working like he was deciding whether to push it further. Then he laughed, short and humorless. "Good luck with your office romance," he said, and walked away, back toward the barn, back toward whatever version of his story he was telling himself. The second he was gone, Allie exhaled like she'd been holding her breath the entire time. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should have handled that faster." "You handled it perfectly." I hated that he said that in front of you. I didn't care what he said. I cared that you looked like you wanted to disappear for a second there. I reached for her hand. "You okay?" She nodded, then shook her head, then let out a shaky laugh. "I don't know. I'm mad. I'm embarrassed he showed up at all. I'm annoyed that some tiny part of me still flinches when I see him, even though I know exactly why we ended." She looked up at me. "Can we get air?" We stepped outside, into the cool night, away from the noise. Allie leaned against the brick wall and wrapped her arms around herself, and I took off my jacket without asking and settled it over her shoulders. "For the record," I said, "you didn't need me to say anything back there. You had it." "I know. I'm glad you did anyway." She looked at me, some of the tension finally leaving her shoulders. "It's a strange thing, watching someone choose to stand next to you in a fight you didn't ask them to join. I wasn't going to just stand there." "I know. That's the strange part. Nobody's really done that before." She reached up and touched my jaw, thumb brushing along it slowly. "Derek used to disappear during arguments. Physically leave the room. I got very good at fighting my own battles alone. You don't have to anymore." Something shifted in her face, open and a little scared and entirely real. "I really like you, Noah," she said quietly, in a way that's starting to scare me a little, if I'm honest. "Scare you how?" "Like I've stopped preparing for the part where it goes wrong." She let out a breath. "I've been doing that my whole dating life. Keeping one foot near the exit, just in case. I don't feel like doing that with you, and that terrifies me more than Derek showing up at a bar ever could." I pulled her closer, her back against the brick, my hand finding hers. Then don't, I said. Stop preparing for the exit. I'm not going anywhere. You don't know that. No, I admitted. But I know I drove 20 minutes out of my way once for a bus stop, and I'd do it again tomorrow. That's not nothing. Her laugh came out wet and surprised. That's a low bar, Noah. It's a start. She kissed me then, slow and certain, her hands sliding up into my hair. And for a while the bar noise and Derek and every complicated feeling from the last 20 minutes disappeared into something much simpler. Derek didn't fully disappear after that night, not immediately. There were a few more messages over the following weeks, each one a little more pointed than the last, needling at the edges of things Allie clearly hadn't fully processed from that relationship. She stopped hiding them from me the way she had at the beginning, which felt like its own small victory. We'd sit on my couch some nights, and she'd hand me her phone before responding, not asking permission exactly, just letting me see the whole picture instead of managing it alone. I keep almost blocking him, she admitted one night, curled against my side, phone screen glowing between us. And then I don't, because some old part of me still thinks ignoring it is easier than making it official. What would making it official cost you? She thought about that for a long moment, admitting I let it go on longer than I should have, which feels embarrassing, considering how loudly I told you I was over him. You are over him. Being over someone and having fully cleaned up the mess they left behind aren't the same thing. I nudged her gently. You're allowed to still be doing the cleanup. Allie looked at me for a second like I'd said something bigger than I meant to, then reached for her phone, opened the thread, and blocked the number without another word. She set the phone down on the coffee table, face down, and exhaled. There, she said. Cleanup complete. How do you feel? Lighter. Also slightly smug. I've been wanting to do that for 2 years and kept talking myself out of it. Why? Because as long as I hadn't officially closed the door, some part of me got to pretend the whole relationship hadn't really mattered that much. Like if I left the door cracked, it meant it hadn't been a big deal. She shook her head, which is a ridiculous thing to realize out loud to your current boyfriend. For the record, I'll allow it. This once. Generous of you. She settled back against my chest, some visible weight gone from her posture. Thank you for not making me feel stupid about any of this. You're not stupid. You're a person who dated somebody who didn't deserve the effort you put in. That's not the same thing. She tipped her head back to look at me. You say things like that so easily. I mean them easily. That helps. Things settled after that. The way things do when you finally clear out the noise that's been sitting in the background of a relationship without you fully noticing its weight. Allie and I kept up our ridiculous office routine, coffee left on desks, banter across the room that made Priya roll her eyes theatrically at least twice a week. We went on real dates, the kind with reservations and outfits chosen with actual thought instead of whatever survived the laundry cycle. I built her a bookshelf for her apartment, badly, with one shelf slightly crooked that she refused to let me fix because, in her words, it has character now, don't ruin its arc. 2 months into officially dating, Allie's best friend Marissa invited both of us to her lake cabin for a long weekend. The kind of trip that comes loaded with the specific pressure of meeting an entire new circle of people who have already heard every embarrassing detail about you secondhand. They're going to interrogate you, Allie warned on the drive up, mountains rising green and hazy through the windshield. Marissa runs a tighter screening process than my grandmother, and my grandmother made you eat 2 slices of pie under surveillance. I survived the pie. This is a different tier of pie. Marissa, it turned out, was warm and blunt in exactly the way best friends of women like Allie tend to be, sizing me up over a bonfire on the first night with a directness that felt oddly refreshing after weeks of careful first family dinner politeness. So you're the bus stop guy, she said, handing me a beer I hadn't asked for. I've heard the story 4 times. It gets more dramatic every time she tells it. Is that a compliment? It's data collection. She glanced at Allie, who was laughing at something across the fire with her cousin, unaware she was currently the subject of an interrogation. She hasn't looked this relaxed around a guy in years. I'm just letting you know I noticed, and I will absolutely notice if that changes. Understood. Good. Now tell me something embarrassing about yourself, so we're even. Because she already knows everything about me. I told her about the wrong coffee order story and about the crocodile test, and by the end of the night Marissa had decided, out loud, in front of the whole group, that I was cleared for continued involvement, which apparently was the highest honor available at that particular lake cabin. Later, when the fire had burned down and most people had drifted off to their rooms, Allie and I sat on the dock with our feet hanging over dark water. Stars scattered thick overhead in a way the city never allowed. You passed, she said. Marissa's approval isn't easy to get. I gathered. She interrogated me like a customs agent. That's love, in her language. Allie leaned her head against my shoulder. Thank you for coming this weekend. I know meeting everyone at once is a lot. I'd meet everyone in your entire contact list if it meant more weekends like this. She was quiet for a moment, watching the water. Can I tell you something? Always. I used to come to this cabin with Derek, she admitted. 2 summers in a row. I wasn't sure how it would feel being back here with someone else. She looked over at me. It feels completely different. Lighter. Like the place finally belongs to me again instead of to a memory. I reached for her hand. I'm glad. Me too. She smiled, small and honest in the dark. For the record, you're significantly better at canoeing than he ever was, which matters more to Marissa than you'd think. I'll take the win. A year after that first bus stop, on a Thursday that felt suspiciously similar to the one that started all of this, the agency kept us late again, another deck that needed one more pass. By the time I made it outside, rain was coming down in that same sideways slant, and the bus was nowhere in sight, having apparently learned nothing from its previous behavior. I stood under the same flickering shelter light, soaked, checking my phone, and a familiar set of headlights pulled up along the curb, hazards blinking through the rain. Allie leaned across the passenger seat, window rolling down, same coffee sitting in the cup holder, same expression on her face like she'd been waiting there for exactly this moment. Get in, Bennett, she said. You look like a golden retriever that lost an argument with a garden hose. You already used that one. It's still accurate. Some material doesn't need updating. She nodded at the coffee. That's yours. Get in before I change my mind about the 20 extra minutes of driving. I climbed in, dripping onto her passenger seat exactly like the first time, warm air blasting from the vents exactly like the first time, except this time I didn't hesitate before reaching over and kissing her at the red light, her laugh muffled against my mouth. What was that for? She asked when we pulled apart. For coming back to the same bus stop a year later like it's nothing. It's not nothing, she said. It's tradition now. I fully intend to keep doing this until we're both too old to drive, and then we'll just take the bus together and complain about it as a unit. That's a good plan. I have several. Most of them involve you. She pulled away from the curb, wipers thumping, city lights blurring gold through the wet windshield exactly like the first time, except now there was nothing complicated sitting underneath it, no hesitation, no unnamed thing waiting to be admitted out loud. Allie, I said, yeah, I love you. I don't think I've said that yet, actually, in those exact words. She glanced over, eyes wide for a second before her whole face softened into something unguarded and bright. You're telling me this at a red light. I'm telling you this in the exact spot you decided, a year ago, that you liked knowing I got home okay. Feels appropriate. I love you too, Noah, she said, quiet and certain, like she'd been holding onto the words and was relieved to finally set them down. For the record, I've loved you since long before tonight. I was just waiting to see if you'd catch up. I caught up. You did. Took you a bus stop and a year, but you did. The light turned green. She drove on, one hand finding mine over the console, fingers lacing together the way they had 100 times since that first rainy night. Except now it felt like something permanent instead of something new. 18 months later, almost to the day, we stood at that same bus stop together, not because either of us had missed anything, but because Allie had insisted on it as the location for what she called, very seriously, an important announcement, which had made me nervous for exactly as long as it took her to pull a small velvet box out of her coat pocket and get down on one knee in the rain. You beat me to it, I said, stunned, laughing, rain soaking both of us the way it had that very first night. I've been planning this for 2 months. I wasn't about to let a little thing like tradition slow me down. She looked up at me, completely soaked, completely sure. Noah Bennett, will you marry me? At this exact bus stop, where you once let a bus leave without you because apparently some part of you already knew what you wanted. Yes, I said, pulling her up before she could finish the sentence properly. Obviously, yes. She laughed against my mouth as I kissed her, rain running down both our faces, the bus shelter light flickering above us exactly like it always had, and somewhere down the street, I could swear I heard a bus pass by without either of us caring even a little. We got married the following spring. Theo, 16 by then, gave a best man toast that somehow worked in 3 separate crocodile facts and ended with him telling the room, completely deadpan, that he'd known I was the right guy the moment I answered his snout-shaped question without hesitating, which he said was statistically rare and deeply reassuring. Marissa cried through the ceremony and later admitted she'd started a second betting pool about how long it would take us to get engaged, which she also lost by a wide margin. Priya, who by then had moved to a different agency but flew back for the wedding anyway, brought a framed printout of the original office betting pool spreadsheet as a gift, which Allie hung in our hallway between 2 photos from the lake cabin. These days, we still take that same route home some Thursdays, just to sit at the bus stop and let it pass, just because we can. Allie still keeps my coffee order memorized, muscle memory built out of years of small, quiet choosing. And every single time it rains, I think about the exact moment I stood there soaked to the bone, watching a bus pull away, and looked up to find her already waiting, engine running, like she'd known all along exactly where this was going to end up. What would you have done if you missed the last bus home and your coworker was already waiting at the curb with the engine running? Have you ever had a small, ordinary moment turn out to be the actual beginning of everything? Tell your story in the comments. And for those who'd like to be a little closer to us, we've opened memberships where you'll get shorter exclusive stories every week with no ads. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next.